Well, it's here, the end of days, and I'm going to step out into it. Don't go away. Hey everybody, it's Paul coming to you as always from beautiful, grasshopper, swarmed over Las Vegas, Nevada. That's right, it's like the apocalypse here in Las Vegas. We are being just inundated with these big, ugly, giant grasshoppers. I gotta tell you, it is awful. It's really, really bad. I would have loved to put a clip here, but if I put a clip here, I'm going to get a YouTube strike and stuff like that, and I don't want to do that, whereas you could just do a quick Google search and go Vegas grasshoppers, and you'll see what we're dealing with here. It is really horrible. It's the frogs and the fishes, or the loaves and the locusts, or whatever it is that is a sign of the end of days, but that's what it is here. It's really horrible. So, what better than to do a post-apocalyptic build right now? Okay, everybody, let's step way out of my comfort zone and into a time post-apocalyptic. We're going to be taking this Hot Wheels cab-over semi-truck and turning it into a post-apocalyptic vehicle. A friend of mine over at 2AHD Cat, Tyzok, said, hey, let's do this build. And now, he's got a leg up on me, I gotta be honest, because he's done post-apocalyptic stuff before. He's pretty good at it. Me, on the other hand, I've never done something like this before, and so you're going to get to watch me screw this thing up royally firsthand. And it should also be interesting in that Tyzok does his builds on his own and then just really does reveals on his YouTube channel, whereas I take you through the whole process. So you kind of get to see a couple different versions of how things could happen. But I'm going to give it my best and see what we can do. Alright, as you saw, we started our usual thing. I used my shielded drilling to drill off the rivet and take the base off. And you saw that weird thing here. The rear axle had popped out of its crimp. I've never seen that before. No damage. Axle's not broken. Crimp's not broken. The axle just managed to wriggle its way out of there. Somebody must have been pushing down on it pretty hard. Anyhow, so we pulled the base off, and then it's got this kind of funky windshield thing in here. Believe it or not, it is transparent. It just doesn't look it. And then all we're left with is this cab-over body. So my first thought was a transporter. It's a semi-truck. In the post-apocalyptic era, they're not going to be driving around in a gas-guzzling semi-truck just to for fun. They're going to be using this to move supplies and stuff, so I want to make a monster out of it, and thus, a monster truck. So we're going to jack this thing up to the sky and put some big monster truck wheels on it. So in addition to my first post-apocalyptic vehicle, this is also going to be my first mega lift of a vehicle. I've lowered some cars, but I've never lifted one like this. So this is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Got to figure out how to make this work. I just started by holding the wheels up to it to see, hey, does it kind of look cool, and do you think it'll work? And the answer is yes and yes. I just got to figure out how to make it work. So, you know, obviously I'm going to have to do some kind of a build for the stuff underneath. After a lot of farting around with that base, trying to figure out how to do it, I decided this called for the 3D printer. So I went to my favorite modeling app Tinkercad online, a free 3D modeling app, and I modeled an entirely new base for this thing. So I've modeled a new base, and you can see it's got the lifted areas. It's even got a little bit of a transmission and a drive shaft, and just some stuff. It's got the hole for bolting it onto the body, and everything should work out right. And so I've got a whole new base that we're going to print, and we'll see if we can make that work. And then while I was at it, I also printed out just a plain old, like a truck bed for putting on the back, where they can load it up with all sorts of supplies like oil drums and food and things like that. So here I've got the parts and pieces that I want. I've got them to scale and all figured out and modeled, and now I'll just export them, and I'll run them over to my Photon resin 3D printer and print them out. While I love my traditional FDM 3D printers, the resin printer is just absolutely the only way to go if you want to print stuff for miniatures, because it can hold such fine details. So that's what I'm using here. Just basically is a resin that hardens with UV light, and it ends up making pieces that look something like these. So here you can see the base and the box that I made for the truck, and it looks like everything is going to work out. Now, I'll be honest, there was a little bit of a failure. You see here in the bed, that curve at the front edge, that's not supposed to be there. They tweaked a little while I was printing them, but not so bad that I can't use them. They just clean them up a little bit and toss them on there, because after all, this is going to be a post-apocalyptic vehicle, so what do I care? All right, let's get back to work. Okay, so the base is not quite perfect either. The spikes I had molded into the front failed, but that's going to work out to my advantage later, and you'll see what I end up doing up there. And it actually bowed a little bit on me, which was unfortunate, but none of it, and in the long run, really ended up making a difference. And you can see here, I don't have the axle tubes, but I'm just setting the base on the axles of the wheels, and that's going to just be awesome. So yeah, this is gonna definitely work. So good news for me, because of the success of the 3D printing, I'm not going to need the base from this car at all. So that's just put off to the side. But I am going to have to use the rotary tool a little bit here. This post is going to be too long for me to screw the car back together. So I'm going to shorten it. Then I'll take my shielded drilling and put a little cone in the end of it and get it all nice and smooth, and then we can drill it out for a screw so that we can put this thing back together later. Now here I've got some brass tubing that I'm going to put the axles through, and these little pieces of brass tube will get glued to the base that I made. I am going to make a mistake here, in that obviously you don't want the front wheels wider than the back wheels. Well, based on the style of the body, if I make the axle tubes the exact same length, that's exactly how it's going to be. So I actually have to make the rear axle tube a little bit longer to make sure that the rear wheels are as wide as the front ones. So after I make these tubes, glue them on, and then do a test fit, I'll figure it out, and I'm going to have to find a way to rip the back tube off, make a new one, and fix that. But in the end, it comes out great. So really all of the artistry, well, most of the artistry goes into the body, so I need to get moving forward on that. So we'll go ahead and take the body for a swim in the stripper, and after it's sat there for a while, we'll tap it all off and scrub it down. Yeah, you can see the stripper did a great job. Really all I'm doing is just kind of sloughing this stuff off the car to the side. It's just hanging on there by goo, so that's all. So we'll slide all this stuff off here, then we'll take it to the sink. wash it, scrub it, and we'll be back. With the truck all clean and scrubbed, it is time for a little bit of a paint job. Now, I want to use a product called chipping fluid on this. And so, basically, after priming with some Tamiya Fine Primer, I'm going to lay down a rust color that I made from Createx by mixing some red and brown. But you can see it's kind of an epic fail in that it's red. You know it's red. I know it's red. We all know it's red. But I'm going to work around that anyhow. I'm not going to go back. You know, it's post-apocalyptic, okay? It's supposed to look like it just rolled out of a swamp. So I figure I can work around any mistakes I make as I make them. So even though it's red, we're going to make do with it. So we'll go ahead and coat the entire thing in red. And then we'll let it dry. And then after it's dry, we will spray it down with chipping fluid, which is a product you can get in model shops, and I will put a link down below for that. But you spray it all over the vehicle after the base is dry, and then you let it dry again. Then you put your top coat on and let it dry again. Once you're done with that, you can begin to chip your vehicle. So right now, we're laying down the rust. We'll let her dry. Okay, so indeedy-do, the rust is dry, the chipping fluid is dry, and now, what other color do you paint a post-apocalyptic vehicle other than flat black? So we're going to be using some Tamiya XF1 to paint this vehicle. We'll begin by misting down the booth, although in this case I really don't care if I get any woolly boogers in the paint job. It really doesn't matter. I actually even thought of brush painting this thing because, let's face it, they weren't driving their vehicles into paint booths when they painted them in a post-apocalyptic world. Now, you might remember earlier in the video I talked about the spikes falling off of the base when I printed it, and that it was a happy accident. That's because I'm really, really excited about what I did here on the front of the vehicle. I basically made a big flat steel bumper out of a little sheet plastic, and then I made some barbed wire. I took a sanding screen and cut one row of it, and then I just coiled it around a paintbrush, slid it off, and then wrapped it around this bumper, and it gave me the best looking barbed wire ever. So instead of spikes, I had this big giant barbed wire wrapped steel bumper, and I love it. It sure is nice to just be able to slather this paint on and not have to worry about, you know, a lot of details and stuff like that, you know, because, hey, it's post-apocalyptic. Okay, so now to remove top layer, all you got to do is take a stiff, wet paintbrush and just start slathering it on and rubbing away, and the top coat will come right off and expose the coat beneath it. And should have given you a rust effect. Instead, I just got a red effect. But hey, it's going to work. Why is it going to work? I'll tell you why it's going to work. Because of this magic stuff, track rust. This stuff is the best stuff on the planet for making rust. Okay? You can dampen it to make it stick down, or you can use it dry to give it a nice dry powdery look. But this stuff is amazing. Any model I have done that needed rust, this is how it got it. So anyhow, what I've done here is I've kept my brush a little bit damp, and I've gotten some of the rust powder on here, and I'm just kind of dabbing it away at the barbed wire. I'm trying not to really get too much onto the bumper because I want the barbed wire to stand out a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and treat this entire vehicle with this track rust, using a combination of some of it that's wet and some of it that's dry, and that will fix all of the red and make it look rusty. Just a quick note, when you're using it wet, you can get clumps of it to adhere to your model. And a lot of times you'll see rust has a texture to it. And so sometimes wet is the way to go, sometimes dry. Fart around with it and you'll figure it out. Overdone, you might say. Posh to that, I would say. Actually, this is going to get a coat of dull coat to kind of lock everything together, and that dull coat is going to bring this rust effect way, way, way down. So you don't really need to worry about going too far. It'll get toned down as we seal it. Okay, the wheels are on. You can see it after the sealer has been applied and how everything has been brought way back down. And so we're getting a really great grungy look to this thing now. So I'm really happy. And I just want to do a little bit more on the roof here. And, just a couple other spots. I'll probably do some inside the tires and the wheels. But just bring up a little bit in some of the high points. Not like I had it before, kind of a perfect blend. Okay, so I know I've kind of glossed over some of the spots and in other spots flat out missed some stuff. And I apologize for that, but I had never done one of these before and I was kind of winging things. And as I was doing stuff, I'd be met with success. And all of a sudden I'd realize that I didn't have the camera running and stuff. So let me update you a little bit here. On the cab, the big flat slats that are protecting the windows, those are just sheet styrene, and I cut some strips out and trimmed them down and super glued them into place. Now, the mesh that's in the front window and over the grill, that is actually a sanding screen that you can get at a home store or something like that. And it's working great for this. It's nice and easy to work with. I tried some window screen, and all it did was start to fray and make a big giant mess, and little pieces of metal were everywhere. I got a piece stuck in my foot still, even as I'm doing this voiceover. So the sanding screen was a much better way to go. Anyhow, what am I doing here now, you might ask? Why do I have this piece of silver chain that I am tarnishing? Well, you'll see why. But anyhow, it is a piece of silver chain, not real expensive stuff, something I bought at Hobby Lobby. And I dipped it in this stuff called Midas Black, which will ultimately give it a tarnished patina finish, which is what I need here. So then I dipped it in some water and just set it aside to dry, and we'll get back to it in a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to use my secret weapon for tires. XF69. Go figure that this is a special product with a number like that. But it is. This is called NATO Black by Tamiya. And it is, without a doubt, the best way to finish tires. Tires aren't really black. If you look at them, they're more of a grayish brown. And NATO Black just gives your tires such a great, authentic, rubbery finish. So I am about to hit up the wheels, or the tires, forgive me. I'm about to hit up the tires with a good coat of XF69 NATO Black. I'll tell you what, I swear by this stuff. Now, would I use it on, say, a model of a show car? Probably not, because more often than not, those tires have been shined up and have things like tire black and stuff like that on them. But on like a truck tire or almost any military vehicle or virtually every post-apocalyptic vehicle you ever would think of doing, NATO Black is absolutely the way to go. I will do around the surface of the wheel and the treads. And, you don't really need to be real careful with this because, hey, this is a truck that's driving through a post-apocalyptic world. It's driving through blood and dirt and fall out and everything else into the sun, so don't sweat it here. Okay, so let's turn our attention back to the chain. I've cut off 2 little pieces. I've got them laying here, and I'm getting a little bit of super glue on my toothpick here. Just enough to dab a spot here. And a spot maybe over here. Alright, we can put that stuff aside. Now I'll take the first piece of chain, and I'm just going to lay the very first link into the first puddle, and then just drape the rest of it out of the way. Just kind of drop it out of the way there. Let that first link sit in the glue and dry. Now I'll do the same thing with another piece over here on the other side. Put that first link in the glue and drop the rest of it out of the way. And we'll let that sit and dry. I think it's going to make a really cool effect. Okay, so here I'm just using some thin brass tubing, and I'm folding it into shape, and I'm making some supports for a cover of the storage area out of these little brass tubes. And I'll make 4 of them, 1 in front, 1 in back, 2 in the middle, and then I just kind of fit them into place, and then I'll just dab some thin super glue on it so it will run around it and lock them into place. Now I thought about modeling like a tarp out of some epoxy putty, and then draping that over that, and maybe some rope and stuff like that. But then I decided I'd just put a screen over here. And stupid me, I tried to use this window screen. I told you about it earlier, about how all it did was shed and little wires were everywhere. So look right there, you can see a piece of the wire just hanging out. I had that stuff everywhere. It wasn't staying together. It was falling apart. It was impossible to work with. Oh, I hated this stuff. I bought this giant roll of it, and it's just a bunch of junk. And so that's where it's going to get relegated to, is the junk heap. But I made a real mess of this, and I wasn't smart enough to figure out to stop early. I forged ahead until I made a real mess and had to rip it all back off and made an even bigger mess. Yeah, you can see I'm still fighting with this stupid thing, and I even super glued it to the truck. And so when I finally wised up and gave up and ripped it off, it made a mess of a bunch of the paint. But that's actually going to work in my favor later. Sometimes happy accidents are the best accidents. Okay, you can see the sides of the bed are a disaster. I'll be able to deal with those a little bit later. And basically, I'm just cutting panels and wrapping the cage with the sanding screen, which is the far better way to go. Now, for the roof, I'm actually forming a lip. This stuff will hold a bend, so I'm kind of making it to size, bending the edges over, putting a little glue in the corners, and forming almost like the lid of a box that is going to sit down over the top of this, and it should work out pretty good. Okay, so my lid is made. I've test fitted it, and now I'm just going to put a little more super glue on here, and I'm going to pop the lid on, and it's going to look pretty bitchin'. A nice little caged area to protect their goods that they have scavenged. Okay, you can see now that the truck is coming along really cool. It looks pretty badass, if you ask me. And even the spots where the paint was damaged by the super glue on the first cage attempt really don't look bad. But I thought to myself, they wouldn't want a big old white bullseye on the side of their truck. They would do something about it if something happened there. What would they do? I thought to myself, they would grab a can of whatever slurry kind of paint they had, and they would just slurm some paint over it. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to kind of wet down a little bit of flat black paint and brush paint it right over the sides. And if a little bit shows, that's going to be perfect. Whatever comes out is going to be right, because that's kind of how it would be. Now, I got a little bit maybe too wet, but I'm not really caring at this point. I figured this is how it would be done out in a survival type world. Just quick and easy and dirty, and that's going to be about it for me. I like it. I like it. When I studied art, somebody once told me to know when to stop. I think it's time to stop. I think this thing looks badass. And you might say, well, where's the weapons? Well, you know what? That's not what this is. This is going to have an armada of chase vehicles and protecting vehicles around it, because this is full of treasure. And that's its one single job. Alright, so I'm calling this sucker done. Let's take a look at the final product. There she is. My badass four-wheel drive semi-truck. I hope you guys liked this video. I hope you guys liked the results. And Tyzak, I hope I did some justice to this. Alright, there it is. Be sure to watch to the end for the glamour shot. Well, so far we have survived the grasshoppers, and we've managed to finish our post-apocalyptic truck. Tyzak, there it is. I don't know what you think about it, but for me, I'm tickled to death. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and thank you for kind of challenging me to do this. I'm going to put a link to Tyzak's page so you can see the vehicle that he did. So please make sure you check it out. You know, he's a new and upcoming YouTuber with a great channel and some pretty amazing looking vehicles that he does. So you're going to definitely want to check it out, and I will put a link down below. Alright, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, click the little bell, and you'll be notified anytime I release a new video. Okay, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and I hope that you are safe and sound wherever you are, away from the grasshoppers. Until next time, be good.